What's up, domestic dads? Welcome back to Domestic Dad, Cleaning Up the Mess, where we talk about figuring out how to be a better man, husbands and dads every single day. This week, I had the absolute privilege of sitting down with Pastor Chip Uhrmacher. He's the campus pastor at Prairie Lakes Church in Cedar Falls, the church where my wife, my family, and my friends attend. I want to take you back to last April. My wife and I walked into church, saw Pastor Chip was preaching, and immediately knew we were in for something special. See, by trade, he's a marriage counselor. So when he teaches, it's not just a sermon. It's practical, life-changing wisdom. That weekend, he delivered a message that hit so deep. He talked about the 4 postures of marriage, from being completely distant to standing face-to-face, fully connected with your spouse. And man, I'll tell you, through my battles with addiction, through everything my wife and I have faced together, we've been in every single one of those postures. I can still remember sitting in church, my wife squeezing my hand, wrapping her arms around me, and pulling me in closer. There were moments I found myself just staring at her, overwhelmed with emotion, because I knew we had made it. We'd been through the mess. And by the grace of God, we were finally in a face-to-face marriage. And that's why I had to bring Pastor Chip on this week, because let's be honest, we all struggle with marriage sometimes. Whether it's addiction, past wounds, stress, or just losing connection in the chaos of life. We've all been there, but the good news is you don't have to stay there. So today, we're breaking it all down. How to recognize where your marriage stands and how to rebuild connection. So grab them up, because today, we're cleaning up the mess. Has life gotten off track? Are you looking for some inspiration to be a better dad? People say all the time, I'd die for my kids. Okay. But would you live for them? Actually live? Get yourself healthy? Make better choices? Eliminate distractions? Would you lead them more intentionally? Would you get sober? Take better care of yourself, physically and mentally. You'd only have to die once. Your kids don't need you to die for them. They need you to live. Have you thought about getting sober, but you just didn't know where to start? If so, welcome to the Domestic Dad Podcast, your go-to destination for candid discussions on journeys into sobriety, parenting, and personal growth. I'm Nick Barnett, founder of the Domestic Dad Project. I've been a dad since I was 18 years old. I'm also a trauma survivor, an alcoholic, divorced, happily remarried, hardworking, humbled by life, domestic dad. On this podcast, you'll find interviews with people who have walked that path, including myself, coaches, mentors, and pastors who can help guide you on your journey. You're going to need resources and inspiration. You can find that here. This is the community for you to lean into, so you can start living life as a domestic dad. So let's grab a mop and start cleaning up the mess. Pastor Chip Uhrmacher.
Hey, buddy.
What's up, man?
I'm good. How you doing?
I'm good.
Good.
Thank you for doing this.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah. This is kind of just so we did a thing today.
We did a lot of things today. God did a lot of things today.
God moved today. And
did.
we just got to be a part of it, man. That was cool. Those were 3 of my very best friends that we got to baptize.
Yep.
Yeah. I was really like kind of a proud moment.
Yeah. It was neat to see the emotion in the baptismal.
Yeah.
Just to know how important this has been, the journey has been for you guys, and how much you mean to those guys. And just to hear your impact is really cool.
Yeah.
Really cool.
It was a blessing. Those are 5 really, really great people. Yeah. So, you gave a sermon a while back that really like moved my heart. I think it moved me because just to preface a little bit, there was 4 postures in marriage that you talked about.
Yep.
And all of those postures I had dealt with during my battle with addiction. And they had addiction had a severe impact on my marriage. And that's one of the things that I think, that gets stigmatized in the whole like addiction conversation is we don't really talk about what it can do to marriages. Mm-hmm. And not just addiction, but I think there are other things, other worldly things that get in the way, right? And what you delivered in a sermon, I was just like, oh my gosh, if I could if I could bottle that and hand it out to every single guy that I talk to, you know what I mean? That it would be impactful to them. So I just thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah,
I appreciate it. So this is going to be one of those. This is going to be a good one. So, yeah, I guess I'll start with the way that I always do, and that is what was childhood like for Pastor Chip? Where did Pastor Chip come from?
Yeah, so I grew up in Hastings, Nebraska, and then Lincoln, Nebraska. So go Big Red. I'm a Husker fan, so love me or hate me for that. Living in Iowa as a Husker fan is rough, man. But yeah, I grew up in a really good nuclear home. 2 younger sisters, parents that loved me, raised me right. Grew up in the church, so I grew up in a Lutheran church. Knew a lot about God, but didn't have a relationship with God until I was in college. So it was interesting. Yeah, got confirmed, was baptized as an infant, did the whole church thing. You know, my whole life. Saw my parents serve in church and give to church. So they modeled a lot of what it looked like and meant to follow Jesus. But I really didn't respond to the gospel until I was a freshman in college.
Yeah.
It was kind of wild.
Yeah, I had a similar upbringing. I was Catholic. Yep. I say it in past tense like I'm something different now, but I think I've landed so far into where I'm at in my own journey that I can say was. And it was like, not to like rag on like the way that I was brought up at all, but it was very ritualistic in terms of like how you like what you had to do during church. You know what I mean? And it was kind of like, okay, I know the move here. You know what I mean? I know when to kneel. I know, the prayers that we say, and
Absolutely.
I know the hymns that we say.
And what page to turn to in the hymnal and all that stuff. Yeah. Oh yeah. You got that down. It's like memorized.
Yes.
Yeah. Same.
Yeah.
I had the same kind of upbringing.
But I came slow to God as well. Like, I think I probably took a lot longer than what I should have.
Sure.
Because some things got in the way, but yeah. Go on, man.
Yeah. And so I met my wife at 18 and we were freshmen at Hastings College. We both ran cross country and track. So she's from Colorado. I'm from Lincoln. We kind of met in Hastings in the middle, and she had Jesus, and there was a glow and a light about her, man. And it wasn't just her physical beauty. I could tell there was something about her that I was attracted to, and found out after a couple of weeks, like, Jesus is what I was attracted to. I didn't know that at the time. And then I joined a Christian fraternity, which I thought they were like unicorns, man. I didn't know they existed. So I saw these dudes that loved Jesus and weren't weird. And they said, hey, come join our Christian fraternity. And I was like, whatever. You write your name down at like the student fair first week of school. And I'm like, whatever. And I'll never forget, it was like a Wednesday night, the first Wednesday of school. They showed up at my dorm door and said, hey, you're coming to fraternity meeting. And I was like, what? They're like, you signed up. And I was like, all right, I'm going.
Let's go.
And I saw these dudes that love Jesus. They're authentic. They're real. They didn't try to have everything perfect and together. And I just saw that they had this life and joy and relationship with Jesus. And I was like, man, I want that.
Yeah.
Right. And so after a couple months, it was October, gave my life to Jesus at a fraternity meeting on a Wednesday night. A pastor spoke. I don't even remember what he talked about, but man, I was cut to the heart. I was convicted. Yeah. I remember bawling on my knees on the floor, asking Jesus to come in and save me and be the Lord of my life. And man, life has been different ever since that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's attractive when you see it from the outside looking in.
Absolutely.
I was hanging out at my buddy's barbershop the other day, and one of the guys in there were like similar in terms of like how sober we are. And he was like, when I left, my barber goes, hey, Nick, you know what he asked me? He said, why is he so happy?
Yeah.
And my barber goes, hey, dude, that's God.
Yep.
It was the truest statement I'd ever heard.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I never go back and I never walk around and I'm like, I'm happy because of God. I'm just happy. Yep. You know what I mean? I'm like, I'm full of life, but it's attractive.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's wild. Proposed to my wife that next summer at 19, we got married at 20. So I always tell people my wife's the best college roommate I ever had. We spent junior and senior year married, and we were that married couple on campus. Yes. And we got to be this example to other people. And it's awesome how many couples that were dating would be like, hey, can we hang out with you guys? We're like, sure. Like, what's going on? They're like, well, you're like married and following Jesus and do it. Like, we want to know how to do what you're doing. And so it's just kind of cool, the testimony that we were able to have in college is being like the married couple on campus.
Yeah.
That's
awesome.
It's kind of wild.
That's awesome. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So when did you decide that your path was going to take that your path with Jesus was going to be to do what you're doing today?
It's been a long, winding journey.
Yeah.
To be where I am now. So I was going to be a coach and a science teacher. Like, that was my thing. I had so many good teachers growing up, a lot of good coaches through sports. And I was like, I want that kind of influence into people's lives.
Yep.
So I wanted to be a teacher. And as soon as I stepped over the faith and I trusted in Jesus, it was like God instantly called me to ministry in this way that I couldn't even explain. And people around me thought I lost my mind because I'm following Jesus. I'm talking about marrying this girl. I'm talking about being a pastor. And people are just like, what happened to you? It's like an atom bomb went off in my life, you know? Yeah. But I'd always felt like, gosh, I want to influence people the way my teachers and coaches influenced me.
Yeah.
And then as soon as I trusted Jesus and started following him, it was like, wait, I can do that for people in faith. I can do that for Jesus, not just in an educational setting or coaching setting, but like in a ministry setting. And for me, it was confusing because I never really considered that. And my image of what a pastor was a dude that wore a big white robe on Sunday, right? Wore the robe and the stoles, kind of was holier than thou. Mm-hmm. Like this is my image of pastoral ministry. And I'm like, well, I can't do that. And I was terrible at public speaking. And so I was like, well, I can't do that, right?
You were terrible at public speaking?
I had never, I literally was petrified of public speaking back in the day, which is kind of weird to think about now, right? Yeah. But my 18-year-old, 19-year-old self was like, I can't do that. And so I started putting all these things in front of God, like, I can't do this. I can't do that. I don't want to wear a white robe. I don't want to just be doing hospital visits all day. Like, that's not what I want to do. Mm-hmm. And slowly over time, people are like, well, there's a lot you can do in ministry. Like, you could be a youth pastor. You could be a Christian counselor. You can go into psychology. Like, there's all these different things that you could do. And so I just began to pray, Lord, show me what you want me to do, you know? And I started to get in some direction. I volunteered for Campus Life, working with middle school. That was my first volunteer ministry gig.
Yeah.
Crazy, working with 6th and 7th and 8th graders, but it was awesome. I loved it. And God blessed it. So I was like, well, maybe youth ministry. And then I started dipping into psychology and counseling. I was like, maybe I want to be a Christian counselor. And then I got to speak a few times at chapel. And I thought, well, maybe pastoral ministry is the way to go. And it's really cool because over the last, 20 years, I've been able to do all those things. I was a youth pastor. I was a family counselor at a treatment center. And now I've been a pastor at Prairie Lakes Church for 15 years. So I've been able to do all of them. And God has kind of slowly brought me each step of the way to where he wanted me to be.
Yeah.
You know? It's kind of wild.
Man, that's incredible.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Did you ever get stifled in your journey? Because I know there have been times for me, even since completely embracing God as, as who God is, right? And being completely obedient and being completely in, right? I know that there have been times where I have just struggled.
Yeah.
I have struggled to stay faithful.
Yeah.
Did you ever go through anything like that?
Oh, for sure, man. For sure. Yeah. I've had my battles. My hardest season was April 29th, 2002. My younger sister, Sarah, was murdered by her ex-fiance. So she had broken off the relationship. He was about a decade older than her, and broke off the engagement. He broke into her apartment one night with a knife and a hammer and took her life. And I mean, nothing prepares you for that kind of phone call and that kind of experience, man. You know, and we were in Colorado at the time. My wife and I were, and my family's still in Lincoln, Nebraska. So here I am, an 8-hour drive from home.
Yeah.
And that atomic bomb goes off, in my family, in my life. And that was brutal. And really for me caused what I would call a crisis of faith.
Yeah.
As a young Christian following Jesus at that point for 4 years, that was the first time in my faith journey where things really got rocked. And I had to figure out, do I trust God? Is God good? If God is sovereign, then why? Right? All those questions you go through in your heart and mind, man. And two, navigating grief. I never lost anybody at that point in my life, really significantly. So now I'm learning how to grieve while also having all these questions with my faith, for the first time, and going, man, how do I put the pieces back together? How do I figure out how to move forward? How do I support my parents? So that was probably the first real stifling moment where I was like, man, how do I recover from this?
Yeah. Yeah. I had a buddy of mine pass away. I've known him since high school. I mean, the guy was a 4-time state champion tennis player. He brought all of us pickleball.
Nice.
You know what I mean? We had gone on vacation with him and his wife several times.
Yep.
We had been bachelor parties together. We had done he was my friend. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And one day, and this is before I quit drinking. And this was one of my tipping points.
Sure.
And I woke up in the morning and my wife said, "Oh my gosh, Nick, Dan passed away." And we were
we rushed over to like a friend's house where like to just verify, like, this cannot be real.
Like it's not
this
real.
can't be real. And all of these questions of like my faith and mortality and how could this happen? This man was trying to start a family. He was like me,
Yep.
How? And there was no cause. There was no real reason.
Wow.
There was no like medical explanation.
Sure.
Just that he was gone. So yeah, in those moments, it's staggering. It really truly is staggering. So yeah, I don't know that I can empathize with if I had lost a sibling though. That had to be so hard.
It was tough too, because, we were about 3 years apart and we fought a lot growing up, like siblings do. And we were both adults. She's 20.
Yeah.
And so for the first time, it was like, we're relating to one another as adults. Like I'd always wanted that, right? Like the friendship level of having a sibling.
Yes.
So for me, the hardest part was feeling like I really did get robbed of, time with my sister as an adult, as friends.
Yeah.
I had very little of that. So for me, that was probably the hardest thing for me to forgive, was feeling like, man, I really got robbed of that,
Yeah. Did that have an impact on your marriage at all?
I think for both of us, I don't think it had a negative impact. I think the impact that it did have was more positive, and that it brought us together.
Yeah.
Because we're, hundreds of miles away from family at that point. And so we really had to rely on one another and our church community at the time, which was very supportive and very helpful. And at the time I worked at a Christian treatment center. And so I've got all these Christians around me every day who have counseling degrees and certified addiction, certifications. Like they know the drill, they know how to help somebody who's grieving, which is super helpful for me.
Yeah.
So I would say more than anything, it probably drew us together because of that shared experience of grief that both of us kind of had to walk through for the first time,
Yeah. Can I ask, whatever came of that situation? Did you ever get to see that guy again?
Yeah. Yeah. And by the way, he'd been in my house. Like he'd spent the night at my house before. So like I knew him well. So it wasn't just like a stranger, right? It was a guy that I trusted.
Yeah.
We went back for a couple of hearings. He wouldn't even look at us in the courtroom. He just stared down the whole time. The blessing is he pled no contest. So there wasn't a trial. We didn't have to look at photographs. We didn't have to hear the story of exactly what he did. He threatened suicide. He left a suicide note, and he confessed to what he did in a note. Went to the top of a parking garage, was going to jump off, but the SWAT team grabbed him. And he's great. And this stuff's all over the news, right? But so no, I've never had an opportunity to face with him. He's in Nebraska, federal penitentiary, serving a life sentence. He's not eligible for parole until I think he's in his 70s.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's locked away.
Yeah.
He's not going anywhere. But I've forgiven the man. And that was something that took me months to figure out how to do, and that it took a lot of prayer, and it took some yelling at God.
Yeah.
Right? I had some of those moments. But yeah, I could say, man, I've forgiven this man. His name's Alan. I don't harbor ill will towards him. I'm free from, carrying that stuff around. But it took a while for me to get there.
Yeah, I'm sure it did. Wow. Forgiven.
Yeah.
Somebody once told me that forgiveness is not for the other person. It's for yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because you can forgive a person even if they're not sorry, right? You can forgive a person who's never apologized to you, because forgiveness is not up to them. It's up to you.
Yeah.
Right. And it's your job to be obedient to Jesus and say, I'm going to forgive the way the Lord's forgiven me.
Not 7 times.
Seven
77
times. Yeah. Hundreds and hundreds of times.
Yeah.
And anything. God doesn't put a qualifier on forgiveness. Right? It doesn't say forgive if or forgive when. It just says forgive as the Lord and Christ has forgiven you.
Wow.
Okay. Well, I've got to do that. Easier said than done.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. You got to find the room in your heart to do that, or figure out how to do that. That's an incredible thing that you went through.
Yeah. It has, and really did shape my ministry, because I started a degree in counseling not long after that.
Okay.
Because it was like, okay, I want to figure out how to help people navigate through what I just walked through.
Yeah.
Right. Because I was helped so much by people that I was like, man, I want to dedicate part of my life to helping people walk through similar things, whether that's in ministry or outside of ministry.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So so the counseling. Yeah. So when did you get into the marriage side of it all?
Sort of accidentally.
Yeah.
I got my master's degree in 2005 from Liberty University in counseling.
Yeah.
And shortly after, got a job at a Lutheran church, actually my home church in Lincoln, Nebraska that I grew up in, Lutheran church. as a youth pastor because they never had a youth program before. And so they wanted to start a youth program. And me growing up there, I missed the gospel and I missed Jesus. Even though I was confirmed and went through all the steps, I was like, man, I'm going to go back to that church, start a ministry so that all those kids hear the gospel. So all those kids have an opportunity to respond to Jesus before they get confirmed, that they can actually answer the question, who is Jesus? Yeah. And am I saved? And am I going to heaven? And all those, just that's what's important, right?
Yes.
And while I was there, the church, the senior pastor there, great man, Greg Olson, faithful man of God, a great leader, kept handing me more responsibility. He's like, hey, you got a counseling degree. Why don't you do premarital counseling here? And I was like, all of it? And he's like, yes. So I said, what do I do? And he's like, figure out what you want to do. Put together a program and do all the premarital counseling for all of our couples getting married at our church. And it's a big Lutheran church. And I was like, all right. So I put together a curriculum, kind of cobbled some stuff together and thought, man, what would I want to hear if I was, 22 and getting married? And so then I started meeting with couples individually. I started doing classes of marriage and couples together, premarital stuff. Then I started meeting with couples that were married, that were way older than me, that were like, help us figure out our marriage. So in real time, I'm going like, okay, I only had one class in marriage and family therapy, but I was like, I'm going to do this ministry wise. And I learned a ton and God did some really cool things.
Yeah.
Through that.
Yeah. Awesome. So that is kind of a good foundation to kind of leverage into the next part of this.
Absolutely, man. Yeah.
Which is that sermon that you gave on different postures in marriage.
Yep.
So I don't know how you want to open that up but I'll just say this one more time. In active addiction, I struggled and still sometimes do struggle with different postures in my own marriage.
Sure.
And I think I think you can be, I'm not trying to like jump ahead here, but you can be in a face-to-face marriage and then fall side by side. Because things accelerate and get busy and distractions happen and things like that. So, so just, you want to start by kind of going through those stages or those postures?
I'll just walk through them. Yeah. Yeah. And to your point, every couple goes through all of these phases, right? The goal is to stay more face-to-face as much as you can in your marriage, to stay connected and close. Like that's the goal. But we all find ourselves in all these postures at different points, right?
Yep.
It's just a matter of how much time we're spending in each one. That really does indicate like the health of our marriage.
Yeah.
And I always lead with this statement of marriage is hard. And the type of marriage you have is the type of hard that you choose. Right? It's the type of hard that you choose. Because you can choose the hard that leads to connection, or you can choose the hard that leads to distance. And I've seen couples do both a lot in 25 years of being in ministry, right? I've seen a lot of couples do it well and a lot of couples do it poorly. And I always remind people, it's not how you feel, it's the work that you do. It's the hard work that you do. And you get to choose the kind of hard work that you get to do in your marriage. Like you get to pick and choose, which is empowering to people because then it takes it out of the realm of like, well, I can't control her. It's like, no. You can do the hard work.
Yeah.
And so part of what I'm going to talk about is like, how do you do that? Right. In these postures in your marriage.
Yeah. Come on.
Yeah. So 4 postures. Here they are. The first is side by side. And so you envision you and your spouse holding hands. That's the side by side marriage where not a lot of conflict. Generally, things are going pretty well, but you're spending almost all your time doing life things together in terms of raising kids, work, making sure the household's going well, which is things that you have to do. You have to do a good part of your marriage has to be side by side, right? You can't do marriage without having side by side posture. The problem is a lot of couples get stuck when they're only side by side, and they would report like, "Hey, our marriage it's all right, right? Our marriage is okay." But they would, if you got down to it, you'd be like, no, we're stuck on this treadmill of marriage. We're making everything work and all the plates are spinning and we're doing okay, but like we're not connecting. Right? Yeah. That's what a couple says when they're spending most of their time side by side.
Yeah. And I think that is that something that happens after the honeymoon phase, after the, kind of like
generally. And usually it happens most when kids enter the picture. In marriage, right? Yeah. A lot of couples without kids don't struggle with this nearly as much.
Yeah.
But man, once it's kids and it's crazy schedules and it's lack of sleep and then it's kids' activities and then work gets bigger. And I mean, there's just all this stuff that competes.
Man.
Right?
Man, come on.
You know exactly what I'm talking about.
I do. Yeah. I do. My wife and I, we are in a very face-to-face marriage at this point, but we have the rhythms of everything of you just get used to the trend. right? I think you said the treadmill,
Yep.
but like I look at it as a trend. Like here, we're in this groove, right? Everything is good in this groove. If we go outside this groove, or if we play around with what's outside of this groove, we could get off track.
Yep.
Right. And I feel like we try to stay in these grooves so everything stays like copacetic. But you know, in doing so, I think you do lose connection with one another.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, so yeah,
very
man.
easy to do.
Yeah.
So that's one. That's one. The second one is back to back. And this is where you're squaring off with your spouse. So you picture the Western when you're back to back and you walk 10 paces, turn around, and try to shoot at each other. Like a lot of couples, man, end up back to back.
Is it so I yeah. And I think one of the things that happens in that back to back stage is like kind of condemning one another or projecting on one another.
Yep.
Or even like criticizing.
Yes, being critical of one another. Yes, absolutely.
Throwing jabs here and there, like, you know what I mean? And but it's the jabs that lead to like a larger, bigger problem when you're criticizing too much, and it's like, does she even love me? You know?
Yeah.
Is he here for me?
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, people usually get to the back to the back spot and start to wonder, like, did I marry the wrong person? I hear that a lot from people. You know, like, I didn't think marriage would be like this, or I didn't think marriage would be this hard. And usually people get back to back because expectations and needs are not being vocalized or met. And so people just assume, right? Like, well, he doesn't love me or she doesn't love me. And it's like, well, that's usually not the case. That's usually
a projection.
Yeah. It's usually needs and values aren't being met.
That's an inward thought being projected onto your partner. Absolutely. That you don't know the real answer to that.
Correct. And a lot of couples get stuck in back to back because they don't know how to fight fair.
Yeah.
They don't know how to do conflict. And they really know how to push each other's buttons and hurt one another. And so they just lob grenades. And it's back to back where it's like, we can't face each other because there's a pile of hurt. There's a pile of rocks and we don't know how to work through that. Right.
Yeah.
And so a lot of couples stay in that spot because they don't have the tools. They don't feel equipped to heal and mend and work on the communication or the expectations or whatever's causing them to get back to back.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I would assume that once you spend enough time in a back to back,
you get to the third posture, which is distant marriage, where, you know, you talk to a lot of people that are in distant marriage and they would say like, well, we don't fight anymore. Right. And I would say, yeah, you don't, but that's because you don't ever connect or talk. And I talk to a lot of couples, and this happens a lot, honestly, to couples that are a little bit older, a little bit more seasoned. It happens a lot when kids leave the house and they had a child-centered marriage.
Really?
Yeah. And now couples, like, I've heard a lot of stories when I sit with couples of, you know, she's sleeping in the bedroom, he's sleeping downstairs.
Yeah.
And there's no date nights. People looking from the outside in would say, well, they're doing okay. I mean, they're together. But they're so distant, they don't even fight anymore. It's like two ships in the night. It's like roommates.
Yeah. It's like all the commonality is gone.
Yep. And for a lot of them, they have there's no hope of change, because for a lot of couples that are in distant marriages, it's been that way for a while. And there's kind of this like pervasive hopelessness and a lot of Christian couples are like, well, I know divorce isn't God's will, so I'm not going to go down that road. Right. But they don't do anything to really work on it. And they just stay distant for a while until something causes it to
completely explode.
Yeah. And sometimes the distant marriages, there has been some significant, either like infidelity. There's been some significant hurt, you know, an addiction to pornography or something that happened where that thing happened and it broke the marriage. And rather than work on it, they kind of swept under the rug and just said, we're just going to kind of have this distant marriage. It's coexistence, you know, and it's rough, man. I've been in my office a lot with couples and just heard these stories and gone, you know, you feel for them and you empathize because you're like, yeah, I've experienced some of that in my marriage. And I would go like, but man, look what Jesus can do. And God can change.
Yeah.
The gospel says there's hope. And so like, you don't have to stay stuck in this disconnected, unfulfilling, broken marriage. You don't have to stay there, you know?
Yeah. So what do you do? What's the prescription?
In that situation, I prescribe counseling first and foremost.
Yeah.
To say, hey, you got to address the things that are there. And so part of what I tell couples is you got to bring it to the light. Bring it out in the light. Whatever it is that caused a relational break in your marriage. And for a lot of them, it's like 10 years, 15 years ago. I mean, it's stuff that like is way under the rug. Yeah. But I tell them, you got to bring it out. And they think it's like
statute of limitations has passed.
Yeah, they're like, we're good.
Well, I'm no longer guilty of that anymore.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But there's still a ton of hurt.
There's resentment. is the word I would use.
Yes.
And once resentment builds up, there is this, I would almost describe it as like hate towards the spouse. And they wouldn't describe it that way, but that's really what resentment is. It's like this built up unforgiveness and bitterness, right? And a lot of us have experienced some of that in our marriage, even if it's just for like a day or a week. We know how toxic that resentment feels. When all of a sudden our lens of viewing our spouse is not Christ's lens, and it's not Christ's likeness, but it's, they've wounded me, they've wronged me. And so I've got this pent up, built up thing against them.
Yeah.
And then it all becomes about, my needs versus their needs. And it gets messy real quick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen, you would not believe the amount of people that I talk to one-on-one that will bring that to me and say, hey, like this happened and this happened and this happened. And she just doesn't see it my way.
Yep.
She can't see it from my perspective. I'm like, hey, have you set expectations or at least given her what your perspective is?
Yep.
Oh yeah, I try, but then I just get shut down. Okay. All right. Yeah. But have you brought those? One of the best things that my wife and I ever did is go to couples counseling.
Amen. There you go.
And I'm not kidding. It's, and I am not afraid to say that because it strengthened our marriage so much.
Absolutely.
It allowed us to actually process things that we didn't even know were hurting us. So yeah, I think counseling is it's huge. It's so good for your marriage.
My wife and I have done a 3-day marriage intensive.
Yeah.
We did it 5 years ago and life-changing. I mean, at that point we've been married for 20 years. And to your point, you learn things in those times and you're just like, oh my goodness, had I known that, I'd be operating differently, but you just uncover things because man, life does stuff. And I always tell people all the time, your spouse now isn't the person that you married.
No,
they are, but they're not, right? Because we change and we grow and we adapt and that's a part of life. And I always tell couples who are struggling, you don't need a new spouse, you need a new marriage, right? You need a new marriage, not a new spouse, because everybody thinks, oh, I'm married to one person and this person isn't right for me and I just need to upgrade or move on. And it's like, no. Because you carry who you are with you into that next relationship anyway. Right?
You don't need a new spouse. You need a new marriage.
Yep.
Yeah. A renewed marriage.
Yes. A redeemed marriage.
Yes.
And I've seen God do amazing things, man. And so when couples sit on my couch, oftentimes they're like, hey, are we broken beyond repair? And I'm always like, first of all, the gospel says, no, you're not. And second of all, borrow my hope because I've seen God do amazing things, right? And
borrow my hope.
Yeah. Borrow my hope. Borrow my hope. Yeah. So those are the three kind of postures that we fall into sometimes that I would describe as less optimal, right? And then the optimal one is face-to-face, man. You want to spend time with your spouse face-to-face, which is eyeball to eyeball, heart to heart connection.
Yeah.
Right. Where you're able to talk about things in a vulnerable, safe way. We're able to pursue Jesus together. We're able to talk about repentance and forgiveness. And when there's this beautiful, mutual submission in marriage of trying to outdo one another and submitting to Christ and to one another. And I've never experienced a bad marriage when a husband and wife are trying to outdo one another in love. Ever. It doesn't exist. Yeah. Right?
Your heart is literally overflowing with love.
Yeah. Where it's just and people hear that.
You're pouring in.
That's exactly right. And people hear that and they're like, oh, come on. Marriage can't be like that. And I'm like, no, it absolutely can be like that. Can marriage be like that all the time? No. Right? But man, when you're regularly having face-to-face posture with your spouse and you're connecting on a heart level, God does just amazing things. And you can have the type of marriage that you go, I never thought this was possible.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's not just this aspirational thing. It's real.
Yeah, man. I mean, as I think about my own journey, me and Gabby's journey and our life together, I mean, and my bout with addiction, right? With alcohol and everything else that compounded on top of that. I mean, there were so many times where it hits different when you can live in a face-to-face marriage and look back at everything that you struggled with. And I get emotional thinking about it because it's like, man, if I just would have taken a note or taken a beat at some point in time and done a little bit of work internally and how I was projecting and how I was doing all of those things, and how I was prioritizing my time and what I invested in and what I invested my time in, if you will.
Yep.
You know what I mean? It was just kind of like, holy smokes. But today, knowing that when we have a problem, we can totally flesh it out. There is not one secret that I have from my wife because a very wise guy told me one time that secrets keep you stuck.
Yep.
And as long as you have, like, my wife is my accountability partner, not only in my sobriety, but in my life.
Absolutely.
Like my life accountability partner. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And as soon as you start looking at when I started looking at my wife that way, everything changed.
Absolutely.
It wasn't like, this is the woman that I'm married to, that I sleep with, that I share my bills with, but this is my partner.
Yep.
And I don't know, I think alcohol does something where it like really separates you, like from not only from like the Holy Spirit, but also like in your marriage, like, and it makes you like super selfish and stuff.
Good.
I don't know how to really like put that all into words, but something happens at some point in time where you stop prioritizing the love of your life.
Yes. And it's true for any addiction.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. When you're giving it all to that and all the emotions that come with that instead of your person.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. But today, to know that like we can, like, if I had something that was on my mind that I was actually embarrassed about, I could go to her and be like, hey babe, I'm really embarrassed, but in my head, this is what I was thinking.
Yeah. Yep.
And when you can hand her your heart that way. And so we like take care of that, and she can do the same to me.
Yep.
It's huge. It's an incredible thing.
When there's that level of trust and vulnerability in a marriage, it's really hard to go back to back for very long.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
it's really hard to do that because you don't want to. And people always ask me, well, how do I have a face-to-face marriage? How do I get there? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so a few of the things I always tell people is like, hey, you got to have a date night. Right. And I don't care the frequency. I mean, it should be more than once a month. But like, you should date your spouse and have landing spots where you spend time face to face at a restaurant, a hotel, a retreat, wherever. Like, have regular time and prioritize face to face time where you're literally face to face, right? Mm-hmm. Whether that's date nights, whether that's sexual intimacy, whatever. But like, prioritize those things that get you literally face to face with one another. Because so many couples, again, they're in a good spot, but they're side by side. And they're not face to face, and they're just trying to get everything done. And it's like, okay, pause, take some date time, prioritize it, put it on the calendar. Don't be weird about it. Like, if you really value that, make room for it and watch what God does there. I mean, it's powerful. And to your point, confession.
Yeah.
Confession, repentance, pursuing Jesus together is one of the best ways to be face to face. Because like you said, when there's no secrets in your marriage, man, it's easy to be face to face.
Yeah.
It's easy to connect on a heart level when you're not trying to shade or shield or hide something from your spouse. It's like, hey, we can actually be here without something between us, right?
Yeah.
Whether that's an addiction or a secret or whatever. Like, we're clear.
Yeah. Yeah. So prescriptions being start with counseling.
Yeah, oh, for sure. And if you're in a distant marriage or back to back and you don't know how to fight fair, or you've just got years of fractured marriage, it's ongoing counseling. When I say counseling, I don't mean go 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
And a lot of couples do that. And then they kind of go, oh, it didn't work.
And I think that's all about like the posture that you have when you walk into the room and you sit down and you're like, am I defending myself? Because I've been in that situation before.
So have I. Yeah.
When I started counseling, when we started couples counseling, I went in with my walls up, on guard, defensive.
Yep.
Like, I'm here because I was asked to be here.
Yes.
You know what I mean? But if you switch your posture and walk in vulnerable, willing to share not only your perspective, but what's on your heart, it changes the entire capability of that session.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you're going into counseling trying to make yourself look good or self-justify, you've already lost.
Yeah.
You're wasting money at that point, because you're probably going to go in and make counseling worse, because you're going to be defensive. Like you said, your walls are going to be up, and it really does take 2 people invested in the process for counseling to really go well and work. But it takes a long time. I tell people this all the time. I've been in counseling for 15 years. Every month I've seen a counselor, at least one, the same counselor, and she is fantastic. And I say that because I want people to know, like, it's helped me a ton. Pastors aren't immune, right? We need counseling. We need support and help. And it has helped my marriage because it's helped me be a better man. Yeah. Right. Because I've had my counselor pick me apart for, 100+ sessions over and over and over and over. Right? And she knows everything about me. And it's good.
Yeah. 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 Good. And then date night. Date night's huge. Date night. Anything else?
I would say express needs and expectations. Don't assume. Say them out loud. Yeah. Right. And with you and your spouse pull in the same direction. You'd be amazed how many couples just kind of resign themselves to like, well, we're just different. We have different values. I'm like, okay, you got to talk about those things.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you start pulling different directions. And that's when you get back to back a lot.
Yeah.
When it's like, we're not on the same page.
Yeah.
When we say we're going to agree to disagree, but we don't really. Right.
Yeah.
So like you have to be very clear about here's my values. Here's my expectations. Here's where we're going. Here's where we're pulling. And it's got to be Jesus first.
Yeah.
Got to pursue Jesus together.
A really wise guy told me one time, he said, all conflict comes from unmet expectations.
That's exactly right.
And I was like, why did it take me so long?
Yeah. Why didn't someone tell me that when I was like 14?
Yeah.
Like, come on. Like that would have saved me a lot of grief.
Like, dude.
Yeah.
You mean if I just talk about stuff and what my expectations are, people can actually live up to them or like, or attempt to, or if I know what other people's expectations are of me, I could try to live up to them and give it like a really good effort.
Absolutely.
And even if I fall short, then at least we can have a conversation about it.
And you can always have a conversation about values.
Yeah.
I tell people this with politics all the time where they start getting knotted up about this person's politics and that person's politics. And I said, stop talking about parties. Talk about values.
Yeah.
Talk about what people value.
Mm-hmm.
Because then you start to understand, oh, well, we just value that differently. They're not good. I'm not bad, vice versa. It's like, oh, they value that higher than I do.
Yeah.
So that's why they vote that way, or that's why they see that way. And when you can have a values conversation with your spouse, it's like, okay, now we're getting somewhere.
Yeah. Ask questions for understanding.
Yes.
Opposed
not assume. The other thing I'd prescribe, if you're a couple that's side by side a lot and you're just in the swirl of life and you're stuck, evaluate and reprioritize, like what's at the center of your marriage? What's at the center of your family?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times it's not Jesus. It's not faith. And what's driving the family to succeed and try to just be side by side all the time is usually money, right? Or status or popularity, or sometimes it's even like people pleasing. Like we're so busy because we're trying to make everybody in our life happy.
Yeah. We're trying to be cool.
Yeah. Or we're trying to keep up with the Joneses, or trying to look good on social media. And
we've completely financially extended ourselves.
Correct. And now the treadmill's really spinning. And so for a lot of those couples, I say, hey, pause and evaluate who or what is the center of your marriage right now?
Yeah.
Who are what's the center of your family? Because usually it's not Jesus. And usually once a couple can identify like, oh man, it really is status and prestige. And we've been running hard after that. And we've been making all of our decisions based on financial things that have caused us to speed up the treadmill in a way that's unsustainable.
Yeah.
Right. So anyways, that would be a prescription for me of like, hey, pause and evaluate who or what is at the center of our marriage and our family. Like, what are we running after?
What do you find is most often at the center?
It usually is status, success, however people define success.
Yeah.
Right. It's a type of house, certain type of cars. And it sounds kind of trite to say that, but it honestly is true. And one of them honestly is like kids' success. A lot of parents put it's idolatry, because what they do is they put their kid's success at the center of their family and marriage.
Yeah.
And so it's all about how many camps can I get my kid in with sports?
Yeah.
How many select teams can they be a part of? How often can they play? How good can they be in school? And it's all about like, they got to succeed because there's this insecure wound in them that says, I'm going to live vicariously through my kids.
Yeah.
And they would never say that out loud.
Right.
But so many parents fall into this trap of, I'm going to push my kids to succeed in everything.
I'm going to make them do what I wish I would have done.
Correct. Or they're just going to succeed and prove that I am a valuable parent and a valuable person.
And now we're going to go into the youth pastor portion of this.
Let's go.
What does that do internally to our children?
It does a lot. Causes all kinds of anxiety, all kinds of pressure, because of my parents' happiness. If the success of my parents' marriage depends on my success in sports and school, man, I have seen that blow a kid up. Just blow a kid up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was in a situation where I got to read some prayers the other day, and one of them was from a kid, and he was actually saying exactly that.
Yep.
That he was praying to God that his parents' marriage could be restored and not based on what his achievements were.
Oh man.
Kid was like 12 years old.
And that's just heartbreaking to hear, because that kid already knows. He already knows that's the expectation. Right?
Man, I always pray. So you're a pastor, so I'm going to tell you what I pray for. I always pray for my sons to know that they're enough in the eyes of God and their parents, that they're already enough.
Yes.
And you know what, man? And I've said this before, but you know what I think I want the most from my kids is what my dad wanted from me. Right. It's not that I don't want them to be the best athlete. I don't want them to have to be like the best student.
Yep.
I don't even want them to be the best at doing chores around the house. You know what I want the most from them?
Yep.
Communication.
Nice.
And I think that's what God wants from us.
Absolutely.
You read all the Psalms and all the Proverbs in
Yep.
the Bible, and
Yep.
it all leads to bring your problems to me.
Yeah.
Turn to me.
Yep.
You know, the picture behind you would even say, like, you know, if you're stuck in the mud, turned away from God, just turn around and I'm right there.
Yep.
I'm looking for you.
Yeah.
Just bring your problems to me. That's all I want for my kids, you know? I hope and I pray that when I love it when my kids bring me their problems, especially today. I used to deal with it differently. I used to go to Advice Dad.
Oh yeah. I got all the answers, right?
Yeah. And I'd be like, here, this is what you need to do. But that never worked out for them because they're not me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And today I kind of like just listen. I just listen, you know, and we pray about it together.
Yeah.
You know,
That's so good.
and then when they do ask me, you know, well, what would you do in this situation? I'm like, whoa, do I have the answers for you?
I got some stuff for you, buddy. I got some stuff coming.
Got a pen?
But that's so good because you're modeling for them. This is how you treat your Heavenly Father.
Yeah.
You go to him because you can trust him and he's safe.
Yeah.
Right. No matter what it is, you bring it to him and he's going to listen. And sometimes he'll give you advice.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Sorry. We took a left turn.
Hey,
there
that was a good rabbit trail, man. That was good. It mattered. Right?
It does. I think, but I mean, as a father, and you're a father, I'm a father. We're probably talking to a lot of parents right now, and a lot of people listening to us have children. It's really on how you model. I always think to myself, you know, how do I respond to my kid when it's the hardest for me?
Yeah.
And I've been the parent, especially during my times where I was drinking or I was not of sound mind, and I would just blow up. I would just snap. Like, you know what I mean? You get into, like, we can get into emotional regulation if you really want to, but I would just say that, you know, yelling at your kids when you're frustrated with them is not going to help them.
No,
it's really not. Because then what that teaches them is that when somebody angers them or when they get frustrated with somebody else, that the right thing to do, the go-to there, is yell and scream about it.
Volume.
Lose your temper,
Yep.
show your anger,
Yep.
show all of that. And it's not. It is 100% John Fuller's quick, slow.
Mm-hmm.
Like, be quick to listen, slow to respond, and slow to get angry.
Yep.
And then just assess.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think that's... Oh, I wish my son would be listening to me right now. That's my advice, Dad.
Like, this is what he needs. I know he needs this.
Yeah. Sorry.
You good, buddy?
No. Yeah. Okay. Let's keep moving.
Yeah.
Where were we at on the postures?
Well, we got through all four.
Okay.
We were talking about some prescriptions.
Yep.
And, yeah, those are the things I'd prescribe to people in those various different spots. You know, and like I said, staying face to face takes work. And you're not always going to be in a face-to-face posture with your spouse. But the goal is to stay there as much as you can. Spend as much time there as you can. That really is the win.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. What about, okay, so you mentioned date nights, right?
Yeah.
So I'll just say it. Phones get in the way of things from time to time.
They can.
Phones and social medias and stuff like that can get in the way of things.
Yep.
Have you talked to couples often about like how like technology can get in the way of their relationships?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And usually it's in the form of distraction.
Yeah.
Usually it's not that people like prioritize social media and they're vain to the point where they care most about what other people think. Sometimes they get there, but really it is the, like, do you put your phone away? Do you put it on silent? Do you have hours of the day or the week when you put your phone in a drawer and you ignore it?
Yeah.
Like, do you have permission to do that as a couple? Because that really is key. That's huge.
I like the whole put your phone in a drawer and ignore it. I haven't done that.
Yep.
Before.
And say it's like from 7 to 9 p.m. or 7 to 10 p.m. on a Friday night.
Yeah.
Or Saturday night or whenever. You get to decide. But really there should be times when the phone is physically not in your pocket, the watch is off, right? The computers are closed, whatever, because then it's just distraction free. And I know for a lot of couples that hear that and they're like, that sounds really intimidating because the phone is what I use as my pacifier to like help negate conflict or awkward moments with my spouse. And I'm like, I would say that's exactly the problem.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what we're trying to do.
That's what we're trying to do, is trying to get rid of that. And I try to model that. I don't have social media at all. I hopped off Twitter during 2020 COVID election. I was like, I'm out. I got off Facebook about a year later and just said sayonara, which is weird because, I'm a pastor of a big church.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people that like used to get a hold of me on Facebook that don't anymore.
Yeah.
But they've got other means to get a hold of me. But part of what I wanted to communicate to people and to my wife especially is that like, I'm not always available, right? I'm always accessible. People know how to get a hold of me, but I'm not always available.
Yeah.
And as a pastor, it's hard sometimes because I want to serve people well and love people well. But just to be a good Christ follower and a good husband, I can't be available all the time. I just can't. Right. And so I just said, I'm not gonna be on social media. And at first it was hard. At first it was weird.
Yeah.
But I haven't sensed the loss of connection with people. In fact, I've seen the opposite happen. My interactions with people are more intentional. They're less transactional than they used to be.
Yep.
I think social media kind of teaches you to be transactional.
Sure.
In your relationships.
Sure.
And so that's been super helpful. And date night for Amy and I is every Friday, man. Now we're unique because we had one son and he's in college. he's at Iowa. So he's a junior at Iowa. Right. So we're empty nesters. So any night could be date night for us to some degree, but still Friday night, we try to go out somewhere almost every Friday, face to face, connect, and some are deeper than others. And sometimes it feels routine. So sometimes you got to mix it up, but I try to model for people that I meet with who I say like, hey, take a date night. I want to make sure that I'm modeling that and doing that almost every week.
Yep.
And it looks different for everybody. But yeah, social media, put your phone in the drawer.
Yeah.
Put limits around technology. Like that's huge.
Hit that do not disturb button.
Correct. It's there for a reason.
Yeah.
Turn
it off. Let it go.
Let it go. But talk about it as a couple, establish some ground rules and follow through.
Yeah. I had to turn the notifications off on all my social medias.
Yep.
And then I buried them also, like in the folders in the back of the phone.
Friction, right? Create friction.
I really did because, like, there was at some point, I don't know, it's been the last few months, but it's like, man, every time that I get bored, and it's not even when I'm bored, anytime that like I'm doing something, I'm like, I don't want to be doing this. I open it up and I open Instagram or I open Facebook, and then you get into like, and you don't know what has happened on social media because you're not on it anymore.
Yeah, no.
But in the last year, I feel like the reels and like the videos that you can just scroll through have become like, they're all over the place.
Oh, for sure.
You can't go more than a block on your phone without like some type of like video that's dialed to what your personality is shows up in front of you.
Yeah. And some of it's even really good content.
Great content.
Sermon clips.
Yes.
It's counseling tips. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that's good.
Yes.
So it's not even stuff that's like inappropriate or like sideways. It's like, it's just stuff.
Yeah.
It's content.
I've curated, I think is the right word, my algorithm to the point where it's like, it's all sermons and Jesus. You know what I mean?
But even then,
it is distracting, but you kind of have to tell yourself, you know what I mean? It's like, I gotta get back to work. I gotta stay in front of my wife. I gotta be face to face because this is causing a side-by-side situation.
Correct.
Or even a back-to-back situation, because I don't know if you've had anybody sit in your office or if you've experienced it, but while using social media, right, you get that look from your wife like, hey, are you going to be present tonight?
Yep.
Or are you you're just going to sit on your phone?
And for me, it's not social media anymore, but it's work. It's email.
Yeah.
Right? Because I've always got emails and I can always respond.
Yeah.
And the number of times my wife has had to give me that look, I'd be like, put your phone away. It's Thursday at 8 p.m. You're home. Be home.
Yeah.
Be present.
Yeah.
So even if it's not
face
social
to
media,
face,
it could be, it could be work. It could be anything that distracts you from quality time with your spouse.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. That's good. Hey, what's your favorite part about being a dad? If you can, you have a child in college now. So like you've got a lifetime of fatherhood to look back on.
And right now he's an adult. And the favorite part right now for me is seeing my kid make mature decisions as an adult.
Yeah.
Because you stress so much as a parent, you pray and you worry and you fret and you go, did I do a good job?
Yeah.
Did I give a good foundation?
Yeah.
Because now he's an adult and I can't be with him all the time. And there's that loss of control. And like, I hope he's doing well. So when I see him, make the dean's list in college, when I see him treat his girlfriend well, when I see him make mature, responsible decisions, I go like, okay, that is so stinking cool. And it's kind of always been that way as a dad through different phases of raising my son where age appropriate to see him take good steps and be mature and succeed. You go like, okay, God bless me. I did some stuff right.
Yeah.
Like, to me, that's one of the best parts of being a dad. And honestly, I would say this too, man, as a pastor, having a son that doesn't resent the church, having a son that doesn't resent God, having a son that didn't feel like God pulled my dad away from me and my family. Yeah. Like I've got a kid that doesn't think or say those things. So for my that makes my dad heart as a pastor really, really happy. It makes my heart sing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really, really good. What's your happiest memory with him?
Happiest memory with my kid. Gosh, that is tough. I think one of my happiest memories is I love to fish. He does not.
Yeah.
So Memorial Day, it was 2020. Memorial Day is COVID. Memorial Day. I remember this. We went fishing and he caught some fish and I kind of taught him how, because he never really wanted to learn as a kid. And I got this picture of him in a bucket hat and he's got this tiny little bluegill and he's just making a funny face. And I'm like, that day was great, man. You know, like I love that because my kid, he knew I would value that and he chose on this day to go fishing with me where he didn't want to go fishing, but he knew it was important to me.
Yeah.
And so he prioritized that, you know, as a 16-year-old.
That's awesome.
It was cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Outside of the prescriptions you've written, what advice would you give couples that are like, if you could give them one piece of advice and they're on the brink of divorce, right? Or they're on the brink of like, gosh dang it, this is not going how I wanted it. Or I'm about to stir up a fight because I am tired of this.
Yep.
If you could intervene in that moment, what would you say?
I would say pray for your spouse.
Yeah.
And try to pray with your spouse.
Yeah.
But pray for them first. And I can't remember when this got implanted in my heart, but it was probably about 20 years ago. I was complaining to somebody about my wife. Probably shouldn't have been doing that to begin with, right?
Right.
Somebody I trusted. And they said, hey, have you prayed for her? And it was so arresting because it was like, no, I haven't. And I should. And the guy I was talking to said, hey, God, by the power of his Holy Spirit, can do more than you ever could by trying to talk to your wife or convince her of something. And if you're at odds with your spouse and you don't see eye to eye, the best thing you can do is pray. If you're at a crisis point in your marriage, the best thing that you can do is pray. It's really hard to be angry or treat somebody poorly when you're praying for them.
Yeah, it's like it's hard to sin when you're worshiping.
Correct.
Right.
And so when you are able to say, I'm going to pray for my spouse, and then hopefully I'm going to pray with my spouse. And if you can't pray with your spouse, it's okay, but pray for them constantly.
That kind of curtails into my next question. What if your spouse isn't a believer? What if your spouse isn't? And I know you'd go to Corinthians and say, don't yoke yourself to people.
Yeah. But don't pull the ripcord.
Yeah. But if they are further away from God and they're not comfortable with that, what do?
Praying together?
Yeah.
I still pray for them.
Yeah.
Pray for them as much as you can because God can change their heart in an instant.
Yeah.
You know, and God will change your heart as you pray.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. God aligns your heart with his when you pray.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's not just the trite Christian answer. Like I have seen that work in my own marriage. I've seen that work in other marriages too, where no matter what the situation is, you can always pray. And some people are like, well, you know, it's like the last resort. And I'm like, that's the first thing you should do in your marriage is pray.
Yeah.
Pray for your spouse. And so that's a part of my morning prayer routine with my wife is pray every morning for my wife. Pray every morning for my kid.
It has worked wonders in my marriage.
Yep.
When you can put your hand on her shoulder and bow your heads together and just say, God, this is what we're looking for. I mean, that's
one of the most powerful things you can hear your spouse do is come before the Father.
Yeah.
On your behalf.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Any other words of advice for us?
Don't wait till it's too late. If I could give other couples a piece of advice is if you're struggling now, seek help. Pull the ripcord. Don't think that some things are magically going to get better. Don't pretend that the problems don't exist. Don't try to like strength up and try to power through it on your own. You need help. If you need help, ask for help.
Yeah.
Right? A pastor, a counselor, both. Don't be ashamed. Every couple struggles.
Ooh.
Right? Every marriage couples. Every marriage struggle. And so when you try to hide and bury, it gets worse.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So you've got to pull that ripcord and say, we need help. And I've seen too many couples wait too long. Where I'm
because of shame.
Because of shame. And I'm like, 6 months ago, this would have been much easier to repair. And now it's this mess here.
Yeah.
Right?
You gotta clean up the mess.
Clean up the mess.
It's the name of the podcast. Clean up the mess.
Here we go.
No, shame has done a number on people, all kinds of people that I know, and myself.
For sure.
Shame has done a number on me.
Yep. Shame and pride.
Yeah, shame and pride. It's just stifling. They are barriers to good things.
Mm-hmm.
Shame will keep you buried. It will. You can't escape it. The only way to deal with shame is to take it to God.
Yeah, because shame says I don't deserve good things.
Yeah.
And pride says I can do it on my own.
Yeah.
And neither one of those things are true.
Somebody told me, one of my buddies that we baptized today told me, he wrote it in our group text. He said, sin is trying to seek happiness without God.
Yep.
And I thought that was profound. I was like, dude,
profound.
Where did you get that? But I was like, that is profound, because it truly is. If you're really trying to find happiness in things that don't have God connected to them, what are you really looking for?
Yeah. Good luck.
Yeah, that's sinful.
Yep.
Yeah. 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 Awesome. All right. Thank you, Pastor Chip.
Absolutely, buddy. This is great. This is fun.
Thanks for joining me, man.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome.
If you're hearing this message, you've listened to the entire episode. And for that, I want to thank you with all my heart. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It really helps us out. If you have questions about getting sober, parenting, or personal growth, email Nick at domesticdadproject.com with any questions about cleaning up the messes you've made. And if your question is discussion worthy, we'll feature it in an upcoming episode. Don't forget, you can watch any of these videos uncut and unedited, filmed in my studio from our YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and search for Domestic Dad Project. Also, please follow us on Facebook or share this episode on your social media. You can also join our community by grabbing some merch. It means the world to me to know that this podcast is making a difference in someone's life. And if this episode inspired you to get sober or simply become a better version of yourself, you can claim your free 60-minute coaching session by visiting www.domesticdadproject.com. Let's continue supporting each other to break the stigma around dads reaching out for help, to get our lives on track while navigating the obstacles of fatherhood. Until next time, keep cleaning up the mess.